Our fourth speaker in this first session is Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Employment and Sustainable Growth for the Scottish Government, John Swinney, MSP. And John's at the back. John, if you'd like to come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. For anybody familiar with my diary, they'll probably, and certainly civil servants will appreciate this. Normally, I work by a different week. I normally finish on a Thursday night in my ministerial life, return to the joys of the Perthshire countryside and try to ignore the fact that I'm a government minister until it all starts again on a Monday morning. So being in Edinburgh on a Friday is a very, very unusual experience for me. But I'm delighted to be here, and I was pleased to accept this invitation because the subject that we're discussing this morning fascinates me in a number of different areas, and I want to talk about how my interest and enthusiasm for the whole question of big data was formed to begin with, and then to try to relate that to some of the challenges that we face in addressing a number of the questions that both Sanju and Chris have raised in the course of this morning's presentations, but which are very material to how we take forward this agenda within the public services in Scotland. I attended a marvellous event in Edinburgh last August. Edinburgh has its great reputation, its international reputation as the centre and the capital for all festivals on the planet in the summer. And there was another one added to this year, which was the Turing Festival, a tribute to Alan Turing. And it was the most curious event I've been at in a long time. There was a dinner at the Royal Company of Archers premises up in the Pleasance, which is a very grand tribute to the great architecture of Edinburgh and to the great history of the Royal Company of Archers, which is steeped in the Edinburgh tradition. Then after dinner there were two presentations which were, I think, probably more relevant to the 22nd century than the Royal Company of Archers had ever been. And one of the presentations caught my attention. It's where a lot of my interest in this subject has come from, and it was about essentially the use of open source data and big data to drive innovations in public service delivery, and to use the vast volumes of data that are now available to us. I saw a statistic which told me that 90% of the world's data has been generated in the last 2 years, which is quite an awesome statistic. NASA alone gathers 1.73 gigabytes of data every 5 seconds. So this enormous expansion of the volume of data that is available at all times in our society. And the presentation that we saw that night, which fascinated me, was how you could take all of this volume of data and utilize it to identify where there was likely to be the emergence of need, particular need, for individual public services within our society. So one of the examples that was cited by the presenter that evening was how you could take a whole variety of different points of data about an individual's circumstances, where they lived, what their aspects of their medical history, their age, whether they were living alone, whether they were living in a family environment, whatever it was, to identify where there may be a need and a necessity for the state to provide support to that individual. And that's a very appealing prospect. Chris went through some of the difficulties of all that. That sounds a terribly easy prospect. He went through some of the real issues of data protection and privacy that are involved in that. But from my perspective as a minister, wishing to ensure that every individual in our society receives the services from the public sector that we can offer and that they require, that we can somehow gather together a focusing of all that data to give us a picture about whether person A will require care services, for example, or whether person B will require care services. Because what I'm trying to avoid is at all times unscheduled use of our public services. You know, if an elderly person has a fall in their home and has to be taken by ambulance to the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary to start their whole journey of repair, recuperation and rejuvenation, that is a much, much more expensive journey than providing care support in that individual's house, making sure their living circumstances are appropriate to their needs. And the challenge is how, as a public sector and community, we can identify how those challenges can best be met. And that lies at the heart of my interest in this subject, and the ability that we have to try to detect what are the differences, how we can use data to identify the differences in individual need that take forward. From the government's perspective, last year we published our strategy in this area, Scotland's Digital Future, the Delivery of Public Services, which had two purposes from my perspective. One was to make sure that a very clear signal was given to everybody involved in the delivery of public services that the government believes there must be an increased utilisation of digital resources in the planning and the deployment and the delivery of public services. And secondly, to signal to the marketplace that the government believes there is an opportunity for market involvement in the way in which digital services can be deployed to assist in meeting these challenges. And that essentially has two forms as well. Firstly, giving a signal to the marketplace that we see enormous, a more significant demand for next generation broadband services throughout our communities, and we're working to deliver that in different parts of Scotland as we speak, and also that some of the innovative solutions that Sanju was talking about today and that Chris has referred to could also be deployed in a material way in the delivery of our public services. The big caveat, of course, is the caveat about how we handle information and how we utilise that information and how we protect the legitimate interests and concerns of members of the public about the privacy that surrounds the retention, the utilisation of data, because there are fundamental differences between the state using data that we have acquired through the normal execution of the delivery of public services and the volunteering by a member of the public to sign up to a social media site or to buy items of goods and services online or whatever we happen to decide to do. And we have, there's very good guidance from the Information Commissioner on this point, but it's a constant factor that public servants must be conscious of. The relevance of the digital aspect of this agenda is entirely consistent with the government's wider approach on public service reform, where in responding to the Christie Commission that we commissioned in 2010 to design an approach to public service reform that would be broadly based and broadly supported, the government set out 4 pillars of our response to that exercise. Firstly, that we had to have a much greater emphasis on partnership, on collaboration between different public bodies, and that gets to the heart of some of the issues about data handling, that there's, frankly, in my view, a real challenge in making sure that data held in one corner of the public services, which may have a relevance to another, is somehow able to be shared to enhance and to expand the knowledge within the whole of the public sector. I wage a constant war against compartmentalisation within the public sector. So our first pillar of our response about partnership at local level between different public bodies is vital, and there is an information and digital aspect to this exercise into the bargain. The second pillar of our reform was about a decisive shift towards preventative intervention. So my example that I started off with, of the choice between an individual falling in their house and starting a journey through our acute hospitals back home, or rather providing proactively support to more vulnerable people in their home to try to minimise the degree of danger they may be in, is, in my view, an essential foundation of how the public services are able to develop in the years to come. But crucially, information has to lie at the heart of how we design that strategy. Thirdly, we have to invest in the people who are delivering public services, which relates to ensuring that there is a constant approach to innovation in the delivery of those public services. And the fourth pillar is about performance, where we have to acknowledge, and data will help us in this respect, how we can look comparatively, not in some crude league table sense, but simply to improve performance, which surely must be an objective of public servants, about how we deliver public services that make a difference to the lives of individuals in our country. Now, underpinning all four of those pillars of our public service reform agenda has to be the effective utilisation of the vast volumes of data that we have at our disposal. And the challenge that we are wrestling with within government, and the strategy that I just mentioned is designed to help us to take forward, is to ensure that broadly within the public services these issues have been taken forward in a meaningful fashion. There has been a number of innovations in Scotland where we've taken forward a number of these points, and I'm particularly pleased with the approach that was taken to in our cooperation with Ordnance Survey, for example, in the signing of an agreement which essentially enables a much broader use of spatial data to assist in the planning and the design of our public services. And that is a particular innovation and exercise of leadership in Scotland that I think has been particularly strong. We've also seen some good examples of how this agenda has been taken forward with the recent award of a £24 million sum to the City of Glasgow as a future cities demonstrator. The UK Technology Strategy Board ran a competition involving a number of cities across the UK to submit proposals on how their city could become a smarter future city. And I think it's a real compliment to the City of Glasgow that it was successful in this respect. And the project will help Glasgow to develop a dashboard that will monitor a range of systems and services across the city. It will monitor energy levels, enabling the city to store energy when demand is low and use it when it's needed most. It could help in tackling the issues of fuel poverty. There are also attributes of the system that will assist in providing real-time information on traffic congestion and public transport services as a further illustration of how these projects can be taken forward. So I think there's a volume of good work that's going on, but of course, as always with these questions, there is a need for greater intensity and greater depth in the work that's taken forward. One of the other crucial issues is about leadership, and I mentioned the strategy that the government has set out. It is vital that that is reinforced by active strategic and operational leadership within the government to take this forward. That's why we've established at the heart of government a data management board which will drive forward data exploitation and good data management. A key issue for the work of that group will be the exploitation of big data. The chairs of the group, Mike Nielsen for the Scottish Government and Neil Logan for the Technology Advisory Board, are here today, are both participating in this conference. And I would want to signal the desire of the government to make sure that we're not taking forward this work in isolation, that we're doing it in partnership and in consort with the whole of the public sector in Scotland, but also in consort with industry and with the academic strength that we have in Scotland. And I think that the opportunities we have through the strength and the depth of the academic research that is available in relation to the management and handling of data within Scotland, some of the magnificent innovations that have come out of our university community. We're in a very fortunate place as a country to have a very short proximity between the academic community, the business community, the world of government, and I certainly give the commitment today that the government will do all that we can to ensure that we draw together all of the various elements that can be drawn together to ensure that we maximise the impact of the academic, business community and government work that is undertaken in this respect. One of the key challenges for us is, particularly in rolling out a digital agenda, digital public services agenda, is to make sure that that is an inclusive agenda. It cannot be an agenda that we take forward that doesn't relate to significant parts of our population. We cannot have parts of our community isolated from the approach that we take in the delivery of public services. So to that end, the government has set out a broader vision of how we want Scotland to be a world-class digital nation by 2020. A vital step on that journey is our investment in infrastructure. We've committed more than £240 million in support of our Step Change programme, which will extend next generation broadband across most of Scotland by 2015. This is a hugely ambitious infrastructure project, one of the biggest in Scotland's history, and it will provide a platform for future economic development. And it's vital that that particular investment enables all of the parts of Scotland to be key contributors to the process of rolling out the digital activities and digital infrastructure throughout Scotland. So the government is heavily engaged in this process in two respects: in using digital technology to enhance the delivery of our public services and to improve the outcomes that members of the public will receive, and secondly, to make sure that we utilise this opportunity to strengthen the economic prospects of Scotland and to strengthen the foundations of the Scottish economy. And that's an approach which operates at the heart of the government's economic strategy. There are a number of caveats that we've got to be extraordinarily careful about, particularly about the issues of privacy and personal data handling. But I'm certain there is a great opportunity here that if the collaborative environment that exists in Scotland today across so many different questions can be deployed in this fascinating area of activity, where we can take the expansion of the availability of data that exists in Scotland today and utilise that in a positive, creative and innovative way to enhance the delivery of public services, then the citizens of our country will be the winners out of that process, and that surely must be a driving force behind the reforms that we take forward. Thank you very much.